So there's one piece of news right now that's dominating global headlines, which is the assassination of the Hamas political chief, Ismail Haniyeh, in Tehran. Joining me is a really distinguished galaxy of people from India today, Gaurav Sawant, Geeta Mohan, and Shiv Aroor, to discuss what exactly has happened today, laying out the stakes of who Ismail Haniyeh was, why this assassination matters so much, who is behind it, how this could have happened. Of course, everyone is working with the assumption that Israel is at this point in time, given that Hamas has blamed Israel, is behind this assassination. So since Gaurav is sitting on my right, I'm going to start with him and ask him to just begin to lay out for us who Haniyeh was. Why is this such a big deal?
Ismail Haniyeh was the face of Hamas. He was the political face of Hamas. Very, very strong man, someone who's been associated with Hamas from its early days. From the 1980s onwards, he was a part of this organization, saw it grow, and was seen as the international face, the diplomatic face, somebody who was also arranging funds for Hamas. Then, ever since he was exiled or was in exile in Qatar, he was the one who was traveling between Qatar and Turkey, arranging funds for this organization, while Yahya Sinwar was the military face. This man also seen as somebody who's more pragmatic, more in terms of trying to find a solution, perhaps dialogue, but not softening
less
his
of a
stand.
hardliner, right?
Yeah, less of a hardliner compared to Yahya Sinwar. And he's the man who's now been neutralized. So will his assassination lead to a massive fauda, if I may, a term that all of us see after the series? Will it lead to more chaos?
Right.
Jordan says it could lead to more chaos. Iran says that they are now honor bound to respond because it's happened on their territory with their guests. So now it remains to be seen how this fauda in this region actually escalates.
Right. So let's actually talk about what exactly happened. Let me go to Shiv Aroor for that. In terms of what exactly do we know has happened at this point in time? Lots of reports about an airstrike, but we just had, in fact, Geeta just interviewed a US Army officer who's saying that, we don't really know much about how this operation took place. Could you just lay out?
Could be a drone.
Exactly.
Drone
so airstrike is the word that's being used. Could you tell us a little bit about what it would have taken to do something like this?
So right off the bat, I want to say that I'm a little suspicious even now because there's no imagery at all. Iran is a big country. People have mobile phones there like everywhere else, and for some reason, this was a slightly remote part of North Tehran. It's a veterans accommodation where this assassination took place. It's apparently a VIP, two-story building where Haniyeh was being accommodated, and all the theories obviously exist. Initially, when the story broke, I remember all the reports that emerged said some kind of a ground raid, which sounded like a commando raid.
Right.
That instantly sounded highly implausible because this is Iran. This is this is not some ragtag country. This is a country with a highly specialized counter intelligence and defense force. So for a mossad ground team to actually conduct a ground raid sounds very romantic and Munich-like, but clearly that couldn't have been possible. So an airstrike is the only real option available. There were actually a couple of interesting reports talking about some kind of a long-range sniper as well. But again, a person inside a house, possibly in his bed, all kinds of theories about him being shot in the shower. These things are fun when there's a fog of war, but I think the reality of what may have happened might be slightly more mundane, and when I say mundane, I still mean a drone. But I think some kind of either a long-range drone with very precise intelligence coordinates, or possibly some kind of a long-range standoff airstrike is possible. But again, Shashank, I'm still a little skeptical about the details. We know he's dead. We're sure he's dead. We know where he was when he was killed. But the lack of information, the journalist in me is hungry for an image of smoke billowing out of a building, some kind of coordinates that suggest, give us some semblance of circumstance, of the manner in which he was killed. I think we're still at the very, very beginning stages, and let's not forget the possibility of him having been sold out is ringing in my head since this morning, since we got the news, because believe me, it is not difficult to go up against your biggest enemy in the so-called enemy in the region and kill someone on his soil, without having someone on the inside.
I completely agree with Shiv, is because this is the first day of Masoud Pezeshkian in office, Shiv. and he really hit a conciliatory note. He in his speech yesterday spoke about how he wants to open up, engage the West, engage Europe, restart the nuclear deal, and his first day in office, this is what he has to deal with.
Right.
So the implications are not just for the region and for Israel and Iran, for the new president.
Right.
Somebody who's known to be a reformist,
Right.
is not a conservative. Somebody who Khamenei was not very happy anointing as the president, and now we have him as the new president. Like Shiv said, a lot of things ringing in our head, whether if it is an insider's job, who was involved, how did they really manage this?
Right. And there's a question I wanted to ask about this specific question of Iran. Like you, of course, are pointing out that, of course, this may have been, he may have been sold out, may have been people within the Iranian establishment as well. This is a possibility that's been floated about. And the other side, of course, is saying that, look, this was, in some senses, some sort of military failure or intelligence failure for Tehran. In some senses, it puts a spotlight into if a drone was fired, how did it manage to evade so many air defense? So at one side, it is, was this... was he sold out perhaps? Or on the other side, does it not seem like a humiliation for Tehran? Could I ask you both, because both of you have had a great deal of experience covering Iran, have been there, have talked about, have been to Israel
Believe me,
as well.
they will be there very soon.
Absolutely. So could I ask you to lay out where it leaves Israel and Iran at this point in time strategically?
So, look, Israel has deep inroads inside Iran. When I was covering the NAM summit in Iran, when Dr. Manmohan Singh was the prime minister, Iran actually did a presentation for all foreign journalists telling us how Israel has killed a number of their nuclear scientists, and they've carried out drone strikes, they've carried out bomb attacks, they've carried out assassinations.
2012 was a big one. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and they showed us those cars that had been destroyed. They showed us those, the way they had been killed. So Israel has inside Iran. Now, one of those deep assets used in this assassination, we do not know, because as Shiv and Geeta said, we don't see a building with smoke coming out, so we don't know if it's a missile strike, we don't know if it's a rocket strike, or we don't know if it's an assassination attempt that somebody inside Iran went in and killed just Haniyeh and his bodyguard.
Right.
We haven't seen a body just as yet. All we've had is statements that have come out from Hamas and statements that now come out from Iran.
Right.
Let's move forward. What would this lead to? And this would lead to perhaps more chaos all across the region, because any hope of ceasefire, any hope of dialogue, that now takes a backseat, because Yahya Sinwar would be now he'll mobilize people for carrying this fight forward. Remember, in the same 24 hours, you've had Hezbollah's number 2 commander also being killed, their military wing commander, Fawd Shukr. Now, when you kill two big guys, there is bound to be retaliation, and perhaps a part of the Islamic world will come around. And so the Hamas is with its back to the wall, the Hezbollah will hit back, the Houthis will hit back, and this would lead to Iran using its proxies to target Israel.
Right. Now, just before I talk about some of the diplomatic implications, I just wanted to ask Shiv, in terms of the American role in some of this, we saw some Israeli reports right before we went into this, actually, that some Israeli media reporting that there was some sort of American role here. We had some interviews this morning where people said that, look, this would not have happened without America knowing about it. So how do you see the American role in this region?
So anyone who says there's no American role doesn't know what they're talking about. Okay, and I'm not being a skeptic about this, but Israel cannot move a finger without the US either knowing about it or being a part of it or facilitating it. So going by the opening assumption that we've all agreed on, Shashank, that it is Israel that has assassinated Haniyeh. It is either you had Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense in Manila, saying we don't know what's going on, which is ludicrous, right? I'm actually kind of shocked that he said something like that instead of saying, we're getting more information and we'll have an update or something. Sure. But to straight up say we have no idea what's going on is ludicrous. There are 2 aircraft carrier groups which have been in the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean. Gaurav and I were in Israel when they landed up there. They've been part of active intelligence operations with Israel. They've been part of the counter Houthi strategy that's been taking place from Israel. There was a report today that the missile that hit Haniyeh's house was actually fired from Qatar, which is where the US has a big presence. So none of this could have happened without the United States. So I think that that bit is beyond question. The real question is, what was the American role in this? Was it intelligence gathering? Whether it was intelligence sharing? Were there American assets on the ground? And we know how strong the US's CIA is in Iran, especially in the post-Trump era. All of those questions actually come to light. To just quickly answer a question you raised earlier about being able to conduct a deep strike inside Iran without radar warnings going off and air defenses happening. Well, this conflict itself is proof that that's possible.
Right. Yeah.
You've had the Houthis firing conventional, terrain-hugging missiles deep inside Israel. Some of those landed when Gaurav and I were there.
Right.
And the drone strikes. They have had drones,
and believe me when I say,
well within the territories of Israel and
believe
Iran.
me, no country has better air defense warnings and defenses than Israel, and they didn't manage to catch them, and Iran most certainly doesn't have better air defenses than Israel does. So sending a sort of low altitude radar evading drone theoretically into Iran is not that far from the imagination.
But Shiv, Iran must be raging like right now because this is the biggest intel failure of recent times.
If they're not in on
it. Because it does remind me in some senses of that Pakistani problem that you have. Right?
He's coming up with this conspiracy theories.
If I may indulge just generally, that we also know that within Iran the IRGC has its particular way, and the reformers have their particular way. The same way in Pakistan, the ISI has its particular way, and the moderate politicians, whatever they want to do.
Just precisely like the Osama operation. If I were to go out and say Pakistan knew about the Navy SEAL team, assassination of Osama, they sold Osama out. That can still be true, but it still needed to be a covert operation because it was one faction within the ISI who had sold Osama out. The ISI is not one monolithic organization.
Exactly.
There are pulls and pressures within them. There are those who are anti-US,
factions
those
and
who are
factions,
pro-US. So it can totally happen in Iran as well. And like Geeta said, with the new president coming in, it may have precisely been timed with that.
And the timing of it, because this is not the first time Ismail Haniyeh was in Iran. He was there in Tehran for the funeral of Ibrahim Raisi as well. So when I was talking to Colonel Fisher, he said that this is how they plan it. There's a term that he used for
something
it.
of life.
Word of life?
Tracking of life. Tracking of life was the phrase. I promised myself I would remember it, but I think I've forgotten.
Planning.
Pattern of life.
Yes. Thank you, Ritika. So pattern of life is what they call it, where they actually pattern the whole thing out as to where he goes, what is the convoy he uses, which is the vehicle that he sits in the convoy. So the strike could have happened anywhere depending on which house he stays in, which room he sleeps in. So or the pattern of life. And in all probability that was done, Shiv, when he was traveling to Tehran the few times that he did.
I'll tell you a funny story, which is actually something that people are very interested in. When people see all the those fancy war rooms and tech that's used in the show Fauda, they wonder if that's what it is in real life.
Gaurav and burst the bubble.
No, I'm not going to burst the bubble, but I'm going to say that Gaurav and I had a chance. The Israelis obviously very secretive about their tech and they don't show anybody anything. But Gaurav and I were lucky enough at one particular unit to get a chance to go inside one of the war rooms. Of course, obviously everything was switched off. But we had a chance to look at it, and I can tell you that Fauda is nothing compared to what they actually have.
Oh, yes.
It is crazy the kind of real-time tracking that they can do on an individual level. If you've seen the show Homeland. With Claire Danes, they've got satellites that can zoom in on individuals and remain autonomous on their tracking between cities, across countries, across flights. That technology actually does exist, and Israel has that technology. So nobody should ever doubt that Israel has the capacity to conduct an operation.
If I may ask you one more question to the two of you, in terms of there was a lot of conversation about redemption arcs for especially the Israeli intelligence and Israeli military after October 7th. There was a lot of conversation about how this was in many ways puncturing that bubble of security, invincibility, this aura that the intelligence agencies had. Do you think this is somehow this will level the scores in some ways for the intelligence agencies? Or
10 months.
No, not at all. Look, the losses that Israel has suffered, and not just to its prestige, 1,200 people being massacred, the manner in which they were massacred. We've all been to that place where we've seen those fences, the way those fences were destroyed, the way children were uprooted from their mothers' laps and killed. the way that it shook Israel, it shook the world. So one Ismail Haniyeh does not get you redemption. Even if they neutralize Yahya Sinwar, it does not get them redemption, because this will actually lead to another escalation. It will lead to another cycle of violence, maybe not immediately, but there'll be another Ismail Haniyeh who will get up. There'll be another Yahya Sinwar who will come up. Basically,
they always have been. I mean, it's always been the case.
Right.
Yeah.
In wars or conflicts as prolonged as the Israel-Palestine,
Sure. There always is someone waiting in the wings.
There's always somebody who would take over.
So if I could ask you to lay out some of the diplomatic implications. We've already seen some of the reactions coming in China, Lebanon, Russia has come out as well, made its statement, and of course, as Gaurav began by telling us, that Haniyeh was someone who was the political chief, was spearheading the talks with the Egyptians, the Qataris. Of course, he was seen to be the go-to guy for those matters. What happens now moving forward? We had earlier in July as well some conversations about Hamas threatening that, look, we'll break off the negotiations and so on to free the hostages. Where do we are?
Shashank, the first thing would be derailment of any kind of talks that the two sides were having on release of the hostages. So there will be a massive derailment there. There is going to be a break of talks over there, and this comes right after Netanyahu visited the United States of America, and they actually came out with a plan saying that, okay, there's going to be ceasefire, they're going to negotiate terms and conditions and seek release, so on and so forth. I don't think that all that is happening.
No, and could this also mean, by assassinating Haniyeh, has Israel basically written off the hostages now?
Or realize that there are no more hostages to be released? Is that their assessment?
Nobody's left alive.
Nobody's left alive.
Shiv, again, Netanyahu is facing a lot of backlash within the country.
Yeah.
Yes.
So many people out in the streets saying, bring them home.
From day one, actually.
From day one.
Yeah.
So, bring them home.
We
So the
reported
focus has
those
to be
streets after
hostages as
streets
well.
where you had next of kin.
But-
They were protesting right from day one.
Yeah, but for Netanyahu administration, I don't think hostages were ever top of agenda. It's for him, it was always redemption, so to say. He was an intel man. He was a man from the forces. For him, how could it happen under his or on his watch?
The concept of the cycle of violence and the cycle of revenge and redemption is a very strong thing culturally in Israel. So it's a good
Absolutely.
question that you ask. And when we were there was a very deep awareness that that Mossad has, this is a mess up of historic proportions, and the reputation of Mossad, which has been built up very quietly over the years since World War II. It will never be recovered. I completely agree with Gaurav. The killing of Ismail Haniyeh, it's one small inch in the journey towards that redemption. But in defense of Mossad, and Mossad has a great deal of work to do. The thing is, people in the intelligence world don't really see it as a long-term kind of redemption, because these are strategic games, and these are all shades of grey. There are really no blacks and whites. Now, if you've got people from Iran helping Mossad, bump off, a Palestinian leader, then all the goods and bads that we kind of perceive the intelligence world to be full of are completely false, and we know that to be true even with our own experience in Kashmir, POK, and Pakistan. But I just think that what happened on October 7th is soon going to be 1 year. Has shattered the Mossad reputation.
It's actually
They
shattered
perhaps will never be able to recover that reputation.
every aspect. Look, we used to think the world of the Iron Dome, right? We looked at Iron Dome even for India, but Iron Dome couldn't protect, and we saw Iron Dome in action. Shiv and I-
It has a capacity.
Exactly.
They went planned.
So-
The attacks were way too many for even the Iron Dome to hold.
So that's point one. So that failure of the Iron Dome, that's one part. The failure of the Israeli fence. It's supposed to have sensors which would sense somebody coming a kilometer away or 2 kilometers away, right? Here there were thousands of people coming into your country. What were these sensors doing? The sensors couldn't have been on a sabbatical. And it was bizarre. Look, Shiv and I and Geeta, we've reported from the LC. We've reported LC extensively. No amount of sensors or technology helps unless it's manned.
Yes.
Here you had a brigade missing, a brigade that had been pulled out, but you need to have basic basic men. Israel isn't as vast as India. It couldn't move men from one corner of the country to the other when thousands of people were infiltrating. So when all of us, when we look at, we need this Israeli fence for our LC. No, we don't. We just need better monitoring of our LC more effectively. Then when the men came in, they went town after town after town, village after village, kibbutz after kibbutz. And where were these famed Israeli security forces in neutralizing them? It took them so many days. And while I was there, in Ashkelon, in several other parts of Israel, you still had the Hamas terrorists inside.
Right.
So, the counter-terror force and all that we've read about Colonel Jonathan Netanyahu and the Entebbe raid and all of that, everything about Israel has been busted after the 7th of
But
October.
also diplomatically, Shashank, I think it is going to play out very differently depending on what really comes out. Now, there are reports that are saying that they used a base from Qatar. Imagine Qatar's involvement in this assassination when Qatar was the country that was
brokering the talks and so on.
and
Or
housing
Haniyeh stay there.
Ismail Haniyeh for so long. Imagine having
Unless he
used
didn't
an
pay his
American
rent. And they wanted to get rid of him.
His
He didn't-
penthouse.
Hey, his penthouse rent he hadn't paid.
or having an American base used from Qatar to take Haniyeh out in Iran. All this is going to have deep implications unless and until we have something that, like Shiv has been saying, is an insider's job. If it is not, and if it has anything to do with the region or countries in the region, it's going to be massive because we are looking at it at this point in time only as a Israel-Iran war kind of a situation and with Hamas involved, right? That's not the case. We have an entire Sunni bloc that hardly supported, forget about Hamas, even the Palestinian cause, Shiv. And a Shia Iran comes out and has been the biggest voice and biggest support for the cause of Palestine. And at this juncture, when you have Iran and the Iranian leadership supporting Hamas for Qatar to be used, it's not confirmed. These are just reports coming in, and they're all media reports from Israel citing some source in the United States of America, so on and so forth. But if this turns out to be true, or even the base being used, an American base in Qatar, this is going to blow up.
So let me just ask you, let me close with that actually. Let me go to each of you and just very briefly, if you could outline what you think happens moving forward from here. There's been talks of, okay, will this lead to escalation? I think Gaurav sort of tipped his hand there a little bit. He did say that he thinks that there is some possibility for escalation. Of course, I was talking to an expert today who was mentioning that, look, if the Iranians wouldn't go beyond a point for Qasem Soleimani, who's a top general who was killed in 2020, will they really go that far for a Palestinian leader who was killed on their territory? I mean, sure, it is embarrassing, but if you believe Shiv, because they may have allowed it to happen.
But Soleimani was not an Iranian territory.
Sure. But just the point being that if your top general is killed, you don't really go beyond the point. Will you really go so far for Haniyeh? So the question I want to ask you, each of you, one by one, if we could start with Shiv and then come back to Gaurav. How likely do you think is escalation in the coming weeks in terms of the conflict?
Hard to say, once again, because, while I agree with Gaurav that Iran will be honor bound to display some kind of a reaction, or else risk looking very, very weak, which it cannot afford to do with a new presidency especially. There will have to be some kind of an attack, but I do not see a direct confrontation. We've been speculating for 10 months now about some kind of big conventional, a conflagration between Israel and Iran. I don't know why. I just don't see that happening yet, because there are complexities involved. You've got never discount the amount of diplomatic US pressure that exists. The one thing we haven't talked about in this, which is probably bigger than anything else, is the US election that's coming out.
And the fact that Lloyd Austin said he doesn't know, they could have actually used it.
Absolutely. So
the Democrats.
So never forget that the kind of pressure that's coming in from Washington in this whole thing will shape what happens. I don't see a direct escalation. You will most likely see escalations in the form of more Houthi attacks, more Hezbollah attacks, with Fawd Shukr being killed in Lebanon as well. I think that kind of thing will definitely
But if I could ask you, let's just have that conversation a little bit on the US elections. Of course, Biden, of course, no longer in the running. Does that free his hand a little bit to do where will the Americans go with this? In terms of what you see the American role being going forward?
Well, the Americans will, once they figure out how to communicate this and message this, and they'll have to damage control a little bit what Lord Austin has said, because he's ended up looking a little clueless, and that kind of damages credibility, in my opinion, at least. I think Biden does get freed up to do some things, but what can he do?
Exactly.
I'm just wondering, what are his options?
This is lame duck presidency for Biden.
It's he doesn't have that much in
Capital,
terms of in terms of capital, in terms of reliability, consistency as far as Iran is concerned. He's had one hell of a year as far as domestic sentiment is concerned. So what can he actually do in this? He'll have to pat Israel on the back. He'll have to congratulate them on a victory, and then sort of watch from the sidelines.
Right, Geeta, what do you think?
Also should be a little careful, maybe, because it's Kamala Harris now, and her
absolutely.
views and take on this entire situation is very different.
She tried to be a little distant with Netanyahu when he was there.
Very distant from Netanyahu. So keeping that in mind, and if they want to be a part of the leadership, continue being part of the leadership, they'll start playing that game knowing very well that if it has to be, it will be Kamala Harris.
Correct.
So I see a shift, because if this was Biden with his as the presidential candidate, maybe there would have been some owning of, or at least congratulating, so on and so forth. If this were Trump, he would have actually owned it, even if his defense secretary knew nothing about it. They would have actually said, "Oh, you're welcome."
Right.
He would have actually said that, but not the case this time. It's a presidential bid in the democratic structure with Kamala Harris at the helm. It's looking different. These elections are going to look different even for Israel, even when it comes to the Israel-Hamas war.
Right.
The larger picture, I think this is going to be a long-drawn affair. It's not going to be direct conflict between the two sides, but you do not any longer require direct conflicts for a situation to remain so tense as has been in the recent past. We're only going to see it expand and escalate, which means you'll see more involvement, because we've seen the Hezbollah attack. You'll see more involvement from Lebanon. You'll also see more involvement from the Houthis. You'll see more involvement from the extremist factions in Iraq. So there is going to be a lot of involvement, and Israel is going to be rather vulnerable. Should there be any moving away from the kind of support that US has given? Again, because I say Kamala Harris is in the picture now, and it's not Biden. He's the president. He might support, but look at the larger picture here. You know, things are changing.
Right. So then, Gaurav, you could close off. We started with you. It's only that we end with you as well.
I look at it a little differently. Kamala Harris may have her
We
own
always look at things
points.
a little different.
She may have her own point of view, but if she were to become president, then it would be the US presidential view. And there, the Israelis or the Jews will have a role to play. And then Kamala Harris will also have a different take. Kamala Harris as a political leader is different. Kamala Harris, if she were to become president, would have a different take, is my appreciation of the situation, and which would not be as hostile to Israel or even Benjamin Netanyahu at this stage, should he remain however long he remains in power. If it's Donald Trump, then Israel will be celebrating. If it isn't, at this, even then, nobody would want a weakened Israel in the region, because if there is a weakened Israel, there's going to be massive chaos for everybody. Okay, and so Kamala Harris will have to temper her views, and we've seen them tempering their views vis-a-vis other countries also. Point one. Point two, the US will move in additional assets to ensure Israel remains safe, as will NATO, and ensuring sea lanes of communication remain safe. That is the world's top priority right now. So in India, other countries, everyone will move into the region to ensure that the Houthis, what do the Houthis want? They only want to disrupt. Nobody wants the world economy to get disrupted at this stage. And why? For an Ismail Haniyeh? Clearly not. Not even for Shukur in the Hezbollah leader, So everyone will tell these people, right now, for the world economy to survive, behave. And behave would be perhaps the message. How well does everyone behave remains to be seen.
Can I just add before? So I agree with I agree with Gaurav that the presidential status in the United States of America vis-a-vis Israel doesn't change at all. But Kamala Harris's administration vis-a-vis what Netanyahu does in Gaza will certainly determine decisions.
Sure, lots of
for-
pressure from Arab American
for-
voters,
absolutely.
so on and so forth. Something.
No, not just that, Shashank, it will determine. She's already made very strong statements on that count. So it will determine how they are going to look at Netanyahu. There's going to be a strong, they have a lot of influence within Israel. So, and Netanyahu also has become prime minister after how many rounds of elections?
Yeah.
So he's not the strongest, leader in Israel. So we are going to look at how US is going to get involved on that front.
Understood.
They'll not be very happy with the move of Netanyahu in Gaza, and if it continues the way it does.
Understood.
There, I think there'll be a change.
So let's leave it at that. We have talked about literally a plethora of issues, starting from, we began with how this operation was carried out, what the implications are, who perhaps is responsible, with an interesting addition from Shiv suggesting there's some Iranian involvement as well. So really, we have laid out the strategic picture as well.
We'll play this clip of Shiv. Should there be any confirmation
yes,
that
absolutely.
an Iranian hand?
There goes my Iranian visa now.
Absolutely. Well, anyway, thank you so much for joining India Today Global. Let me thank Gaurav, Geeta and Shiv again for joining us, for explaining what has happened with the Haniyeh assassination and really just unpacking every single angle there is based on the information that we have right now. Thank you again for watching India Today Global.